couple of years ago, I was on my way to meet the President of the United States. Now, for any American, this is a big deal, but for an active duty military officer going to meet the Commander-in-Chief, this is huge. So I had to nail my intro. I had to get the right first impression with the President. I toyed around with a couple of different ways, nothing felt right. I thought maybe if I just stuck with the official thing, I'd be good to go. So something like, hi, Mr. President, I am Commander Johnson. And that was too stiff, and it wasn't gonna work. So I thought, maybe I should go with something that's just as formal, but a little more relaxed. And this is what came out. An honor to meet you, sir. My name is Theodore. And I wasn't gonna do that. And I thought if I just relaxed and just said, hey, sir, my name is Ted, it'd all be good. But no matter what I came up with, I started to realize that the problem I had was with my introduction and with the phrase, my name is. My name is. When each of us are born, we are given two gifts, the gift of life and the gift of name. And even though we're given these two things as soon as we come into the earth, we look at them as separate and distinct. We think of our lives as a place to find happiness and love and security and purpose. And our name is just that verbal distinguisher we use so we don't go around calling people a you. But maybe there's something more there. Maybe the reason we are given these two gifts so close together that last the entirety of our lives is because there's a relationship there. Perhaps our names are our first and best clue as to our life's purpose. Now, the ancient Romans certainly believed this, and so much so that they had a phrase they repeated in Latin, nomen est omen, which means your name is a sign or name is destiny. When our parents gave us our names, it wasn't a matter that they took lightly. They named us after family members or religious figures, someone famous, maybe an original creation. But no matter what inspired them, it's as if we were imbued with some sense of purpose, to be wise like a biblical figure, or compassionate like a grandmother, or maybe beautiful like a movie star, or even unique like a name they create for us. So are our names signs? Here's a couple people we could ask. Not too long ago, the Wall Street Journal interviewed a lawyer in New York, and her name was Sue Yu. A lawyer named Sue Yu. We could ask the 19th century Brit who popularized the toilet, and his name is Thomas Crapper. And you Wikipedia scholars out there can check my facts on this. And then, of course, we're all familiar with the former congressman from New York, Anthony Weiner, who had to resign from Congress for sending explicit pictures of his last name. So these are called aptronyms, and this is when your name is particularly apt to a defining characteristic or an event in your life. It basically means that you are a reflection of your name, and that your name is a reflection of you. And this is something I know a little bit about. When I was 8 years old, my family moved to a new state, and I had to start a new class, and I stood up in front of the class to introduce myself, and I said, hey, my name's Teddy. And everyone burst out laughing. And I'm thinking, are my clothes funny? Is my head shape funny? What's going on here? And then a student blurted out, what kind of name is Teddy? Wow, man, my name is funny. My name is odd. My name is awkward. Hey, can you imagine me going to meet the President of the United States saying, hey, my name's Teddy? It sounds ridiculous, right? Well, my name is ridiculous. I felt ridiculous. Social scientists have shown that we are so attached to our names, even our initials, that they affect the choices we make. They affect the things we buy, the career decisions we make, where we live. For example, they found that because my name is Ted and starts with T, I'm more likely to buy a Toyota than a Honda. They looked at 66 million Social Security records and found that there were more Mildreds in Milwaukee, more Phillips in Philadelphia, and more Jacks in Jacksonville. And another study looked at black men in the state of North Carolina between the years 1910 and 1975. What they found is pretty interesting. They found that black men with first and middle name combinations of famous people lived 3 years longer than their peers with just regular names. And the three most popular first and middle name combinations here were George Washington, Frederick Douglass, and Theodore Roosevelt. So, all things being equal, the black man named George Washington Johnson would live 3 years longer than the one named Mark. And this study means a little something to me because my grandfather's death certificate was part of it. His name was Theodore Roosevelt Johnson. And how we got that name, how he got that name, is a bit of an interesting story as well. And it begins with an assassin's bullet into the abdomen of the President of the United States in 1901, William McKinley. And when McKinley succumbed to his injuries, his vice president, Theodore Roosevelt, ascended to the presidency. And one of the first things that President Teddy Roosevelt did was invite a black man to the White House for dinner. Now, in 1901 America, this was something you did not do. It was still an era of racial inequality, racial subjugation, racial segregation, and to have dinner together, it's an intimate event that just implies the equality of all those attending. And that wasn't something the country was ready to hear, and Teddy Roosevelt, frankly, didn't care. And so he invited Booker T. Washington to dinner, and Mr. Washington accepted. So on the day of the dinner, Mr. Washington shows up to the White House, and they let him in. And he goes into the blue room of the White House. And there he waits in the blue room, and he waits, and he waits. And eventually the president comes down, and Booker T. Washington walks out of the blue room, walks up to the president and says, "In honor to meet you, sir, my name is Booker." So, of course, he didn't say that. He doesn't say it like that, and I guarantee you the president doesn't say, "And my name is Teddy," right? But what does happen is the two men have dinner. And when the country found out about it the next day, many were furious. Newspapers were inundated with angry letters from readers asking about the gall and wondering how the president would have the audacity to invite a black man to dinner. And one official was so appalled, and this man would go on to become the governor of Mississippi, that he said, because Booker Washington had been in the White House, that, and I'm quoting here, the odor of that nigger was so saturated the house that the rats left to sleep in the stables. Now, part of the country that wasn't upset with the president were poor blacks in the South. Two of them were my great-grandparents, Will and Annie Johnson. They were so inspired by the president's act of courage. They were so inspired by just the symbolism of the dinner that maybe one day their children could have the dream that they could never realize. Maybe one day their children would have the opportunities that were not available to them. Maybe one day their children could realize the inalienable rights that our country promises, but they did not get to experience. And so because of that, they named their second son after the president, Theodore Roosevelt Johnson Sr., my grandfather. This is him here on the left, and he was a minister in South Carolina. He was married, had a number of kids, and for reasons the family doesn't quite understand, he waited until his fourth son to pass on his name and the family dream. And that was to my father, Theodore Roosevelt Johnson Jr., there on the right. Perhaps feeling the Americanness of his name, my father did what many early Americans did, and the young man headed west. But he returned home because one day my grandfather was giving the eulogy for a member of his congregation. And as he was wrapping up, he raises his hand to the sky and says, "I'll see you on the other side." And then he sat in the chair and died on the spot. That was 2 years before I was born. And my name is Theodore Roosevelt Johnson III. And so we're back where we started with my name is. My name is. It's just this passive phrase that just seeds your defining to someone else. It's like saying my car is blue. It makes you the object of your own sentence. You become just an adjective. And there was no way I was going to be passive in the moment that I was to meet the President of the United States. There was no way I was going to subjugate the family name and the family dream as had been done to my great-grandparents a century before. So, on the day that I am to meet the President of the United States, I showed up at the White House, and they let me in. And I walked into the blue room of the White House, and I waited in the blue room, eerily similar to the events of over 100 years before that had inspired my great-grandparents to name their son that. I walked out of the blue room of the White House, and the president comes up to me and says, "Hey, what's your name?" And I said, "I am Theodore Roosevelt Johnson III." Not my name is, I am. I am my father's son. I am my mother's child. I am the hopes of two poor black sharecroppers, Will and Annie Johnson. I am equal. I am free. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. My grandfather's last words were, "I'll see you on the other side." Well, I am the other side. My name is just such a passive way of presenting yourself to the world. It's giving your purpose over to someone else to define. I am, that phrase asserts who you are. It declares your purpose for yourself. I am takes ownership of your destiny. I am the fulfillment of someone's dream. It's a hell of a responsibility. It's a life-defining responsibility. The gift of life and the gift of our name. Those two things we were given so early on in our lives. And they last us for the entirety of our lives. And our names even outlive us. For me, name is destiny. After all, I mean, is it really coincidence that just like Sue Yu, the lawyer, and Thomas Crapper, the plumber guy, that I am Ted, giving a TEDx talk? Or is it destiny? Thank you.